Welcome to the Architects of History, a new podcast series.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're digging into our series, Architects of Ancient World, Part 1, Personalities Who Laid Foundations.
And today, we're heading way back, deep into ancient Mesopotamia, maybe 3,800 years ago. We're aiming to pull back the curtain on someone whose name, well, it's probably one of the most recognized from that entire era.
Absolutely. This deep dive is called Hammurabi, Lawgiving with an Iron Personality in Babylon and His Legacy of Justice-Seeking.
Right. And when you hear Hammurabi, I mean, let's be honest, one thing probably jumps out immediately. An eye for an eye. It's become this, shorthand for harsh justice.
It really has. It sounds brutal. It's very memorable. And, well, yes, that principle, lex talionis, reciprocal punishment, it's definitely there in his famous code. Law 196 makes it quite plain. If an Awilum, that's a man of the elite class, should blind the eye of another Awilum, his eye shall be blinded. Simple as that.
But just grabbing onto that one phrase, it's a bit like judging a whole building by looking at a single brick, isn't it? Hammurabi's code was huge. Nearly 300 laws covering, well, pretty much everything. And the man himself wasn't just a lawgiver. He was this master strategist who took a, frankly, modest city and forged an empire.
So you have that stark eye for an eye image, pure retribution, it sounds like, clashing with Hammurabi's own words from the very start of the code. His stated mission, to make justice shine in the land, to destroy the evil and the wicked, that the strong might not oppress the weak.
Exactly.
That tension, the sort of noble ideal versus the, well, often pretty brutal reality. And that's what we're exploring today, right?
That's the core of it. We really need to unpack that complexity.
Okay, so let's set the stage. Picture the world Hammurabi is stepping into. We're talking around 1792 BCE. Babylon, what does that look like? What's the feeling on the ground?
Well, first, you need to forget the later image of Babylon, the massive empire, Nebuchadnezzar, hanging gardens, none of that yet. In 1792, it's a vibrant city, sure, lots of mud brick buildings right there on the Euphrates River. Important locally, yes, but just one city-state among several powerful rivals, definitely not the dominant force.
Right, so the political scene wasn't unified at all.
Oh, far from it. Mesopotamia at this time is this constantly shifting landscape of rival Amorite kingdoms. You've got Larsa down south, Eshnunna over to the east, Mari up northwest. It's a real patchwork. Alliances form, alliances break. It happens incredibly fast. For a clever ruler, it's a world of opportunity, but also, constant danger.
So Hammurabi isn't just handed a stable kingdom. He's stepping into a really complex, volatile situation, a bit of a political chessboard.
Absolutely. And you can see he understood that perfectly from his early moves. For the first maybe 20 years of his reign, he plays this incredibly careful game. It's not the picture you might have of some conqueror just bursting onto the scene.
So what was he doing then in those first couple of decades?
Mostly focusing inward, consolidating his power base there in Babylon, building strength, but quietly. He reinforced the city walls, launched these big public works projects, building temples. Obviously, that helps with religious legitimacy. But crucially, building and maintaining the canal systems. So vital for irrigation, trade, everything. He's building this reputation, you see, as a responsible ruler, a just administrator, not just a warrior king.
And we actually have evidence of this. His letters survived, didn't they?
That's right. Remarkably, we have hundreds of his letters, clay tablets, and they show this amazing level of personal involvement. I mean, real nitty-gritty stuff.
Yeah.
Orders to officials, settling local arguments, micromanaging the irrigation schedules, which were, absolutely critical.
That attention to detail must have been foundational.
It really was the bedrock. Because after about 2 decades of this very patient, meticulous groundwork, suddenly the pace just shifts dramatically.
Oh, okay. Here come the military campaigns. This is where that iron personality starts to show itself in a maybe more obvious way.
Yeah, exactly. Over the next 10 years or so, Hammurabi just unleashes a series of campaigns. He moves with, frankly, astonishing speed and military skill, systematically taking out his main rivals. Larsa, then Eshnunna, then Mari, one after the other.
He wasn't just defeating them, he was actually absorbing their territory.
Right.
Creating a single state.
Yes. He forged this empire. But it wasn't just brute force from day one. It was this combination, decades of patience, meticulous administration, building resources, and then this burst of decisive, unyielding military action. That blend, the careful planner and the swift, ruthless executor, that really paints a picture of this iron personality.
Right. And once he's built this empire, he needs something to hold it together, to govern it, unify all these different peoples under Babylon, which brings us, I suppose, to the main event. The Code of Hammurabi. the monument itself.
This is the iconic artifact, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Try to imagine seeing it back then. It's this towering stone slab, over 7 feet tall, carved from hard black diorite. It's designed to be imposing, to project power, authority.
And its discovery, that tells its own story too, doesn't it?
It really does. It wasn't actually found in Babylon itself. French archaeologists unearthed it in 1901, way over in Susa, which is in modern-day Iran. Why there? Because centuries after Hammurabi, an Elamite king invaded Mesopotamia and carted it off as war plunder.
Yeah.
Even invaders centuries later recognized how significant this thing was.
Wow. And right at the top, there's that famous carving.
Yes, the relief sculpture.
Okay.
It shows Hammurabi standing respectfully before the seated god Shamash. Now, Shamash was hugely important. The sun god, yes, but also the god of justice, of order in the universe. And in the carving, Shamash is shown handing Hammurabi symbols of kingship and divine authority, often interpreted as a measuring rod and a coiled rope or ring.
That's not subtle symbolism.
Not at all. It's a crystal clear statement. Hammurabi isn't just making up rules, he's claiming divine endorsement. He's positioning himself as the God-chosen dispenser of justice for his entire kingdom. It elevates the laws beyond mere royal decree.
And the text itself, the writing on the stele, it starts with a prologue that really hammers this point home, doesn't it?
Oh, it's a masterpiece of royal propaganda, really. Hammurabi is presented as the chosen shepherd, selected by the top gods, Anu and Enlil, for a very specific, very noble purpose.
And he states that purpose quite clearly.
He does, in quite stirring language, actually.
Yeah.
He says he was chosen, and I'm quoting roughly here, to bring about the well-being of the oppressed, to cause justice to prevail in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evildoers, so that the strong should not harm the weak. I mean, that sets a very high moral tone, doesn't it? Almost idealistic.
It really does. Sets a high bar. And the code itself, the list of laws, it's huge.
It is. Nearly 300 individual laws. They aren't numbered on the original stele, mind you, but scholars see them grouped thematically, covering this vast range of human activity in Babylon.
What sort of areas are we talking about?
Oh, everything. Starts right off with things like false accusation and, interestingly, if you falsely accuse someone of a crime punishable by death, you get the death penalty. So, serious stuff right away. Then you have commercial law, rules about agriculture, incredibly detailed sections on family life, marriage, divorce, inheritance assault, and even standards for professionals, like fees and liabilities for doctors or boat captains. It's remarkably comprehensive.
Okay, so we have this noble opening statement, protect the weak from the strong, but how would that actually play out in a society that, as you said, we know was deeply hierarchical?
Yeah, this is where that tension we talked about becomes really visible. Babylonian society had these clear divisions. You had the Awalim, the elite, the property owners, officials, then the Bimushkinim, sort of commoners, free people, but lower status, and finally the Wardum slaves. And the code is absolutely explicit. The law applies differently depending on who you are and who the victim is.
Can you give us a concrete example, something that really shows this?
Law 8 is a great one. It deals with theft, say, of an ox or a sheep. The penalty depends entirely on who owned the animal, if it belonged to the temple or the palace. You pay back 30 times its value? Ouch. If it belonged to a mushkenim, a commoner, you pay back 10 times. Still steep, but less. And here's the kicker. If you can't pay the fine in either case, the penalty is death.
Wow, so the punishment isn't just tied to the act of stealing, it's directly linked to the status of the person you stole from, the value placed on their property, legally speaking.
Precisely. The hierarchy is baked right into the penalty structure. And think about that famous eye for an eye, lex talionis. That principle is mostly applied when both the offender and the victim are from the same elite class, the Awalim. So Law 196, Awalim blinds another Awalim's eye. His eye is blinded. Fair enough, maybe. But then look at Law 198. If an Awalim blinds the eye of a mushkenim, a commoner, or breaks his bone, the penalty isn't losing an eye. It's just a fine, 1 mina of silver.
So it's not really reciprocal justice across those class lines at all?
Not in the same physical sense, no. The code often uses that tit-for-tat punishment for equals, but shifts to fines or other penalties when class status differs. And unsurprisingly, those penalties are weighted to protect the property and person of the elite.
And then the overall harshness. It's pretty undeniable in places.
Oh yeah. Many penalties are incredibly severe by our standards. Law 22. If a man has committed robbery and is caught, that man shall be put to death. Just flat out. Doesn't seem to matter what was stolen or the circumstances. Robbery and caught equals death.
And it gets even more unsettling in how it extends responsibility sometimes.
Yes, Law 230 is probably the most chilling example of the code's sort of unyielding logic and how it prioritizes this idea of retribution, sometimes even over individual guilt as we'd see it. It says if a builder builds a house badly and it collapses and kills the owner's son, then the builder's own son is put to death.
Oof. So the punishment falls on someone completely innocent, the builder's child, just to mirror the loss suffered by the owner.
Exactly. It reflects that iron personality again, maybe. Prioritizing a kind of brutal symmetry, a form of order where the consequences just ripple outwards, even if it seems profoundly unfair to us today. It really makes you wonder what it must have felt like to live under that system. Maybe there's a certain predictability, knowing the rules are written down, but it's a predictability based on often terrifying consequences and deep ingrained inequality.
It's easy to focus just on the harshness, I suppose. But you mentioned earlier the code also shows some surprising, maybe sophistication in other areas.
Absolutely. It's not all just brutal punishments.
Yeah.
Look at the laws around commerce, for instance. You find detailed regulations for boatmen carrying cargo, laws about leasing fields, handling loans, interest rates. There are even elements that look a bit like early forms of insurance or liability if goods are lost in transit. It points to a pretty complex economy humming along.
And family law, too. You said that was a big part of it.
A huge chunk of the code, yes. Now, it was definitely a patriarchal society, no question. The laws reflect male authority. But within that framework, women did have certain rights that are quite notable for the time. A woman could own property in her own right, she could inherit property, she could even engage in business, and her dowry, the property she brought into the marriage, was legally protected.
So they had some economic agency.
They did, and if her husband decided to divorce her without a good reason, say, she hadn't done anything wrong. According to the code, she was entitled to get her dowry back. Plus, if you'd borne him children, she usually got a share of his property too, to support herself and raise them.
That sounds like a significant protection.
It is. But again, it's that mix. Because you also have laws like Law 143. If a wife is deemed neglectful, if she gads about, wastes household resources, belittles her husband, she could be prosecuted, and if found guilty, the punishment could be being thrown into the river, drowning.
Right. So protections on one hand, very severe controls on the other.
Exactly. It's this complex picture. Ultimately, the code seems laser-focused on maintaining stability. Stability of the family, stability of the social order, and it used both protections and incredibly harsh penalties to achieve that.
Now, thinking about Hammurabi's place in the bigger picture, in legal history, it's important to remember he wasn't actually the first king in Mesopotamia to write down laws, was he?
That's a really key point. No, he wasn't. We know of earlier law collections. There's the Code of Ur-Nammu from Ur, way back near the end of the 3rd millennium BCE, and the Code of Lipit-Ishtar from Isin, maybe 2 centuries or so before Hammurabi. So the idea of writing laws down wasn't entirely new. Many of Hammurabi's specific laws probably echo these older traditions.
Okay, so if it wasn't being the absolute first, what was Hammurabi's real innovation here? What makes his code so famous, so significant?
I think the true innovation lies less in the absolute novelty of every single rule and more in the sheer scale, the comprehensiveness, and maybe most importantly, the way he used and promoted his code. He gathered existing legal traditions, probably added new rulings, refined things, and then presented them as this single, definitive, divinely backed system that applied across his entire newly conquered empire.
So it was the act of consolidating it all, rationalizing it maybe, and then publicly proclaiming it on this massive scale for this huge territory. That was the revolutionary step.
Precisely. Think about what that signifies. It's a powerful statement of centralized state authority taking charge of justice. Before this, maybe justice was handled more locally by village elders or temple priests based on custom. Hammurabi is saying, no, these are the laws, my laws, sanctioned by the gods for everyone in my empire, and putting them on these big stone stele, potentially in major cities, making them visible, permanent. That's a huge step.
So even if we debate how much direct influence his specific laws had on, say, later Roman law or biblical law, the symbolism is just immense.
It really is. It stands as one of the earliest and most complete examples we have of a ruler trying to establish a comprehensive written legal code across a large, diverse territory. It embodies this idea that law should be codified, it should be public knowledge to some extent, and that the state has the primary role in administering it.
And maybe that's his most lasting legacy when we talk about justice seeking. Not necessarily that his laws were perfectly just by our standards, clearly they weren't in many ways, but the idea itself, that justice should be sought, defined, written down, and proclaimed by the ruler for the whole realm.
You could definitely argue that. It's a fundamental step, however flawed in practice, towards the concept of the rule of law. moving away from purely arbitrary decisions towards a system where the rules, even if harsh, even if unequal, are at least laid out, knowable. It forces us even now to grapple with what justice meant then and how our understanding keeps evolving.
So Hammurabi really emerges as an architect, doesn't he? Both of an empire built with strategy and force and of a social and legal order through this monumental code.
Yeah, that iron personality seems clear. In the relentless drive to unify the empire, the commanding presence needed to enforce these laws, and the ambition to create something lasting that codified order, even if that order was harsh and hierarchical.
And that legacy of justice seeking, it's definitely, as you said, a complex tapestry. You have the high-minded ideal in the prologue, the ruler's responsibility, and the genuinely groundbreaking act of codifying and publicizing law on such a scale.
But yeah, you can't separate that from the reality embedded in the laws themselves, the enshrined inequality, the brutal punishment. It's a powerful, maybe unsettling testament to humanity's long, ongoing, and often very imperfect quest for order and fairness.
As we finish this deep dive on Hammurabi, it really makes you think, doesn't it? We have our written laws today, obviously, but what about the unwritten codes? The subtle rules based on status or power or wealth that might still govern aspects of our own societies? And how do we make sure our modern pursuit of justice truly lives up to that ideal protecting the vulnerable rather than sometimes just reinforcing the existing structures?
Those are big questions, and they echo right back to the challenges faced in ancient Babylon in their own way. Well, thank you for joining us on this exploration.
Thank you. And join us next time on Architects of the Ancient World. We're leaving Mesopotamia, traveling over to ancient Egypt to look at the fascinating life and reign of Hatshepsut, a woman who declared herself pharaoh and left an incredible legacy of building and ambition.
Yes, her story is quite something. We'll delve into that next time. Until then, keep thinking about those foundations laid so long ago.
Please subscribe us for more podcasts. Have a good day.